So how did you get into track and field?
So I started running track and field in seventh grade. I had just moved to the area of Henry County, and I hadn't really played sports before then. Prior to seventh grade, I was actually at a conference, and for some reason, there was an activity where the kids had to race the adults, and I won the race. And one of the adults came up to me afterwards and said, "When you get older, you need to run track and field." And I didn't think anything of it. So fast forward years, a few years forward, and seventh grade comes and I try out for the track and field team. I remember sitting in the gymnasium, like lined up because there were like 50 kids trying out. And I was sitting there with my number because I didn't know anybody, and I was so nervous. I felt like I was gonna throw up. And after like a week of trying out, I actually made the team, and since then I just been running track and field.
So yeah, even with like you starting in track and field and been progressing through it, through middle school, high school, and college, what's some things that you really dealt with?
I think the two major takeaways I can take from track and field is that it built my faith and it taught me where my true validation comes from. So when it comes to faith, I came from a school where at the time I was the fastest person in the school, fastest person in the county, and almost pretty much ranked for state. And I was in this bubble where I was considered almost great. And at the time, even though I was great, I wasn't college level great. This was like the end of my senior year in high school, pretty much my senior year. And I hadn't received a track scholarship yet, a full track scholarship to a school that I wanted to go to. And I remember it being like April of 2015, and I still didn't know where I was going. My parents had invested so much money into me training. My coach, who was basically my one-on-one coach at the time, had invested hours upon hours. Prior to that, I had never had a spring break. I had never had a summer break, and I was always just practicing, pushing for this track scholarship and to get into a school that I really loved. And April 1st, 2015, I still had no idea where I was going. And I remember just sitting in my bed and I was like, God, I promise you, you get me into Georgia State University for a track scholarship, I will never doubt you again. That was probably the dumbest thing I said at the time because, this is 2019. I have doubted God so many times after that. But I think God really gave me that testimony just to prove that He was almighty and that He could do anything that we asked or wished from Him as long as it's according to His will. And so that really built my faith because there were so many times after that one instance, that one prayer that required so much faith from me that I had to say, God, if you do this for me, I will never look back on you again. Even though there are times when I look back, He's still been so faithful. But that really increased my faith because it did come to pass 7 days later, April 7th.
Because you can even say, like, even going into the Bible, like Elijah, right? When he called down fire, it's like in that moment, he had so much faith that fire would come down, and then next thing you know, man's running from Jezebel.
Right.
So that's really interesting to think about.
Yeah. Another thing that track and field did for me was really address the issue I had with validation. Throughout my college track experience, I learned a little bit too late that I required a lot of validation from people that were older than me, leaders, coaches, teachers, and I would work so hard to make other people proud. And I didn't come from a family that my parents weren't proud of me. My parents are proud of me. I don't know where that issue really came from, but I always strive so hard to make people proud of me, to make people happy, and it kind of took away from me focusing on what I need to do for myself and having confidence that God is already proud of me and I'm enough. And so it wasn't until I ended my track and field career in college that I began to really focus and understand on where my validation comes from, that if God has spoken something over my life, it is permanent, and no matter what else other people say, no matter what somebody else thinks about me, it doesn't matter, that my confidence and validation comes from Christ.
This is called that. So this is plan I've been reading, like even what you said when you said that. And they called this thing, they said this phrase, it was impression management, right? And the quote they said was like, busyness serves as a kind of existential reassurance, a hedge against emptiness. One author wrote, obviously your life cannot possibly be silly or trivial or meaningless if you're so busy, completely booked and demand every hour of the day.
Right.
So it's like, even with like tracking the things that we do, sometimes we get in that place where we're just so action oriented that we have to
Right.
do this thing so that people can actually acknowledge us.
Right,
And
yeah.
we get this thing that,
Mhm.
okay, yeah, now my life actually means
Means
something.
something,
And God
yeah.
said, you are more than enough.
Right, right. And that's something I think as a woman, you'll deal with it a lot.
Right.
When you, even outside of sports, becoming a partner, becoming a mother, I think a
Right.
lot of women also deal with like, am I doing enough? Am I
Exactly.
enough for society? Because society has a huge toll on the way we look at ourselves. And
Right.
I think that knowing that your validation and who you are right now in this state of life is enough for Christ, it goes
Right.
a long way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good. That's good. So even with that, like these things that we've been dealing with, how did God really show himself evident in those situations and even track as a whole? How did he use you and heal you and, be glorified through your life during track and field? How did God show up in sports for you?
For me, I think that it was literally just one race at a time. I came into college wanting to be the number one person at Georgia,
Right.
and Georgia State, and that didn't happen. And I think that one thing that God really taught me was that it's patience, one race at a time. And I think the lessons he taught me in track and field, I don't think he brought me to Georgia State to be an Olympian. I think he brought me here to teach me specific lessons on what I can use in my next chapter in life, which I know I will be using.
Right.
I started off running a specific time my freshman year, and I ended with a great time, but it took time, it took patience.
Yeah.
And I think God really showed up and showed me, like, being great doesn't happen overnight. There's a process, there's a turning, there's actually time that God needs to build and to chisel you into the person that you need. And
Right.
if you wake up one day and you're great, you won't appreciate it as much as someone who actually went through the process. So it took me 3 years to understand that, and that's just helped me in my life with when things don't go the way I want, or whenever I see my friends or family progressing in a certain area and I
Yeah.
feel like I'm still stuck. I just think about, like, everyone's timing is different,
Yeah.
For example, like my roommate that I had at college, Sydney, she's an amazing athlete,
Yeah.
and she progressed running a lot faster than I did. And the beginning was kind of hard because I was just like, we're both freshmen, we should be doing the same thing. But
Yeah.
it taught me at the time, like, your season is different. Patience is like, you need the endurance to go forward and
Right.
to take that time to be able to progress. So that's just one example of how God showed me, like, patience is key in this life. And if you
Yeah.
rush anything that you do in haste, you will lose in haste the same way. And so that's something that I will always keep with me.
Yeah, because like actually being put in the fire through that time
Right.
so that you can come out as precious. Even
Yes.
in sports, like
Yes.
being patient, like it might not come to you right then or
Right,
there, but like
right.
God is actually going to show himself evident.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
yes.
It reminds me of James chapter 1. It says the testing of our faith
Yeah.
produces perseverance. It doesn't say
Yeah.
the test. It's not just one, it's the
Yeah.
testing. So it's
Right.
continuous testing to just make us persevere and endure
Mm-hmm.
things in the future.
Yeah. Well, lastly, what is one big testimony that you can take out of track and field on top of everything else that you've already said?
Outside of the spiritual aspect, I think physically God definitely showed up in my life. Let me start over. Outside of spiritually, I think also I learned a lot about Christ physically. Starting track and field is a sport where your body image and your weight, it's a great influence on how you run and perform. And so it was critical that I always stay in shape, that I always look good. And so finishing track and field or retiring from track and field in the past year, obviously I've not been as active as I used to be. I used to work out like 4 times a day, 2 workouts in one day, and coming from that to a very like sedentary lifestyle where I'm not really doing so much, my body image definitely changed. And there was a time period this year where I was very unhappy with the way I looked, and I felt that my worth was tied to my body image, whether realistic, like how many muscles I had, and counting my abs, and like knowing how my calves looked, and I was so wrapped up to it. Like I would complain about it so much to where I honestly think some of my friends were like annoyed, like this is getting to you too much. And so it was really just recently when I just started to understand, like, as a woman, the way you look you know, is valuable. If it's valuable to you, you should be able to take the steps that you need to take care of yourself. And knowing that no matter how you look, you are a beautiful woman of God. You are fearfully and wonderfully made. And I've just learned to start regaining my confidence in how my body's transitioning outside of track and field.
That's good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Do you have any last encouraging words?
Trust God and don't give up on the process.